If your company has recently asked you to document your workflows, introduced a new platform designed to support your function, and started having someone shadow your work without a fully clear reason why, you may already be inside what I now call the replacement playbook. 18 months ago, I thought I was fine. Senior director, 11 years in, best performance reviews of my career. I had survived my company's last restructuring and come out with more visibility, not less. I was not worried. I should have been paying attention to 3 things that had happened in the previous 9 months. Not because each one was alarming on its own, none of them were, but because together they were a sequence, a play being run in 3 acts. And by the time I recognized it, I was already deep inside the 3rd act. A colleague of mine named Ethan, the kind of professional who has watched enough economic cycles to recognize a pattern most people haven't lived through yet, sat down across from me for dinner and asked me 3 questions. By the time I answered the 3rd one, I had figured out something I should have figured out a year earlier. What Ethan showed me that night is what I now call the replacement playbook. Every great sports team has signature plays they have built, refined, and run so many times that the execution is automatic. Every player knows their role. The sequence is locked. The outcome is predictable, as long as the other team doesn't recognize the play before it's finished. Corporations run the same kind of plays when they have decided to automate a knowledge worker role. Not because there is a conspiracy, because the plays work. They are efficient, defensible, and they have been quietly refined across hundreds of organizations over the past 3 years. The professionals who survive them are the ones who recognize the play being called before the final whistle. The replacement playbook has 3 plays. They run in sequence, and together they form a roadmap so consistent across industries and company sizes that once you see the pattern, you will recognize it anywhere. Let me walk you through the plays. Before this video ends, I'll show you how to identify whether your role is already inside this pattern. There's also a free professional pivot profile linked below. It maps where your expertise still has leverage. Takes 4 minutes. Play 1. The documentation play. About 9 months before that dinner with Ethan, my company launched what they called a knowledge management initiative. The stated purpose was to capture institutional expertise across the senior team. Processes, decision frameworks, the kind of knowledge that lives in one person's head and walks out the door when they do. Completely reasonable. I had actually thought it was overdue. An analyst from the company's AI transformation team sat with me twice. I spent 6 weeks documenting everything I owned. My decision frameworks, my escalation paths, the vendor relationships, the specific contacts, the workarounds, the things you only accumulate after 11 years of doing the job. Onboarding sequences for new hires. The edge cases that never appear in any manual because they depend on pattern recognition you can't write down until someone asks you to. I was thorough. I was proud of how thorough I was. When Ethan asked what happened to the documentation after I submitted it, I started to answer and realized I actually didn't know. It had gone into the knowledge management system. I had assumed it was filed somewhere, available if someone needed it. I had never followed up. At the time, I thought nothing of that. Why would I? The initiative was complete. I had done my part. What I didn't understand was that the documentation wasn't being filed. It was being used to train a system that was learning to do what I did. Every decision tree, every exception handler, every escalation path I had carefully written down was raw material. Not for a new hire, for a platform already being built in the background. I had given them the architectural drawings, they were building the machine. That is play 1, the documentation play. It feels like recognition. They value what you know. What they are actually doing is extracting what you know and putting it somewhere you no longer control. Play 2, the platform play. About 8 months before that dinner, running parallel to the documentation initiative, though I didn't connect them at the time, my company rolled out a new workflow management system. It was positioned as an efficiency tool. It standardized how work moved through my team. task assignment, progress tracking, approvals, queue management. Real-time visibility for leadership into everything in the pipeline. I championed the rollout. I trained my team on it. I genuinely believed it made things easier, and it did. What I didn't see was what it was actually doing underneath the efficiency gains. When Ethan asked whether the platform logged the decisions my team made, the answer was yes. Every action time-stamped, every decision attributed, full audit trail. He asked if there was an approval layer that hadn't existed before. Yes. Things used to come to me directly. Now they routed through the system first. He asked what happened to the work queue when I was out for a week. The platform handled it automatically. Continuity without single points of failure. That had been one of the selling points. Then he asked how often the platform flagged something for my direct input these days. When the system launched, it flagged things 4 or 5 times a week. Now it was once or twice. The system had gotten better at resolving things on its own. He asked what it was learning from, the documentation, my decision frameworks, my escalation paths, the 6 weeks I had spent writing down everything I knew. The system was not just running my workflows, it was learning to make my decisions. And the frequency of calls on my judgment had been declining steadily for months. Not because the work was getting simpler, but because the machine was getting better. I was inside the system. I had helped build it. And I was becoming the inefficiency it was designed to remove. Something had been quietly bothering me about that declining flag count for weeks. I had told myself the system was just maturing. Sitting across from Ethan, I started to wonder if that was actually true. That is play 2, the platform play. It feels like support, a tool to make your job easier. What it is actually doing is absorbing your function, systematizing your judgment, and making the work continuous without requiring you. Play 3, the shadow play. 6 weeks before that dinner, a junior analyst had started sitting in on my client calls. The company described it as cross-functional exposure. She was rotating through departments to broaden her understanding of the business. Routine professional development. I had welcomed her. When Ethan asked what specifically she was observing, I described it out loud for the first time. My approach to difficult conversations, how I handled escalations, the way I read a client's situation in real time and adjusted, when to push, when to back off, when to bring in another voice. The judgment calls, the things that cannot be reduced to a workflow because they depend on reading a situation that is slightly different every single time. The things the platform was still flagging for my input. Ethan asked if she had started taking notes independently, not waiting for my post-call brief, forming her own observations during the call itself. The previous week. I had noticed it and thought she was just getting more comfortable. As I said those words out loud, I felt something I hadn't felt in the 9 months of living through all 3 of these things. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. That is play 3, the shadow play. It feels like mentorship. You are developing someone, passing on what you know. What it is actually doing is capturing the last layer of your expertise that the system hasn't absorbed yet, so the system eventually can. I didn't say anything for a long time after Ethan's 3rd question. He didn't fill the silence. He just waited. And in that silence, I did something I had never done in the 9 months I had been living through these 3 things one at a time. I put them in sequence. Play 1. Document the expertise. Feed it into the system. Play 2. Build the system around the function. Let it absorb the routine work. Reduce the calls on human judgment. Play 3. Identify the judgment calls the system still can't make. Train a person to observe them. Train the system from that observation. 3 plays, 1 playbook. And I had been a willing, enthusiastic participant in every play, because each one arrived with a reasonable cover story, and I never stood back far enough to see the whole field. I said it out loud. I have been helping them run this play. Ethan said, "You did your job." I said, "I did my job inside a playbook I didn't know I was in." I want to give you some numbers, because this playbook is not unique to my industry or my company. Research from firms like Gartner, McKinsey, and Harvard Business Review is starting to show the same pattern. 80% of enterprise workflow automation deployments begin with a formal knowledge capture phase. Exactly what I participated in. The average time between that documentation phase and the first workforce reduction, 14 to 22 months. I was at month 9 when Ethan asked his first question. In organizations that deployed AI workflow platforms, requests for human judgment declined an average of 67% within the first year, as the system absorbed decision patterns from documented protocols and observed behavior. My platform had been running for 8 months, right on schedule. And in study after study of knowledge worker automation projects, the employees whose workflows were documented in Phase 1 were not employed by the same organization 30 months later. Not because they underperformed, because the playbook worked. These are not predictions, they are documented outcomes. The replacement playbook runs consistently because it is designed to be invisible until it is complete. Now you have seen it. That changes everything. I drove home that night and I did 2 things. The first thing I did was open a document I had started 6 months earlier. After my company's last restructuring, I had sat at my kitchen table and done the math on what I cost versus what it would cost to replace me. I had understood, clearly, analytically, that the structure was changing. I had opened a blank document that night, a framework. The first page of something that was going to belong to me. It had a title and a few bullet points. I had been meaning to get back to it when things settled down. Things don't settle down. I opened the document and wrote for 3 hours. Not a resume line. A method. The specific framework I had developed over 11 years for a problem every organization in my industry faces, and nobody had published a clean answer to. Something with my name on it. Something that lived on my laptop and not on their server and not inside their playbook. The second thing I did was answer the question Ethan had asked me on the way out of the restaurant. He had turned back and said,
"If someone asked you right now what you are known for in your industry, not what company you work for, what you are known for, what would you say?"
I had an answer. I had always had an answer. I had just never built anything around it. I thought about a colleague of mine who had been asked that exact question in a job interview. 20 years of results, genuine expertise, a track record most professionals would envy. When the interviewer leaned forward and asked what she was known for in her industry, she opened her mouth and realized that every answer she had was attached to a company that no longer employed her. She had built entirely inside their walls, under their brand, and when the playbook ran to completion, she had nothing portable to take with her. She is rebuilding now, at 52, from scratch. I did not want to be answering that question in an interview room. I wanted to answer it while I still had my network, my credibility, and daily access to the problems I knew how to solve. So I started building. Not instead of my job, alongside it. I published my first framework article 3 weeks after that dinner. A speaking proposal the month after. The first consulting inquiry came 4 months in from someone who had read the article and recognized the methodology. I kept going. 14 months after that dinner, I gave notice. My consulting practice was already generating more than my base salary. The platform was still running my old workflows. The analyst had learned the judgment calls. None of that was mine anymore. But what I had built in those 14 months, the frameworks, the published thinking, the reputation in my niche, that was entirely mine. And it was compounding in my direction for the first time in my career. One more time before we close. If you recognized any part of what I described, the free professional pivot profile is the place to start. 4 minutes, 8 questions. It maps what you already know to income paths where you own the output. Link is in the description. It is free and it is waiting. Here's what I want you to take from this. None of the 3 plays feel like emergencies when they happen. Each one has a face-saving cover story. The documentation request feels like recognition. The platform feels like support. The shadow feels like mentorship. That is exactly what makes the playbook so effective. You participate willingly because each play makes sense when you are inside it. But you are outside it now. And once you have seen a play called, you cannot unsee it. If you recognize one of these signs inside your company right now, pay attention. If you recognize two, start building. If you recognize all three, in sequence, within the last 12 to 18 months, the window is open. It will not stay open. You do not have to leave your job. I didn't leave mine for 14 months, but I stopped running inside their playbook and started building my own. Same expertise. Same 11 years of domain knowledge, same pattern recognition. Just pointed in a direction where the output belongs to me. That is what I want for you. Your expertise is the asset, AI is the leverage, income is the result.